Well, good morning. Good morning. All right, thank you. Well, good morning. It's an extraordinary pleasure to be with you as this conference begins and focuses on the truth in the statement that together we rise. And that's what Gear Up has proven all across this country. And all of the credit really belongs to you because you have done the hard work that has taken young people's lives that others would have written off, you've written them back in. Lives that some might have seen as irrelevant, you're making significant. And I want to just thank you because I know that these young people, as is proven by so many examples, none better than the chairman of your board, that lives that could have been paltry can be made powerful through education. Give the chairman a great round of applause. Give yourself a great round of applause. The chairman's father was a coal miner. Right? Signed his signature with an X. And when he says he's a first-generation high school student, some might have missed that. But educational achievement is a tool of empowerment that's historically verifiable all across the world. And Gear Up is making it so in the lives of so many people. I want to thank the board, the staff, our new president, the great leader of INSEP. Give him a round of applause. You're going to be hearing from Randy in a little bit. Now, let me say a couple of things. One is that when I got in, I got a chance, my wife and I, we got a chance to walk down near the pier. And I saw this very familiar sign down there, the Wharton School. And I studied at Dietrich Hall, and Huntsman Hall is now the new facility there at Wharton, but I didn't know that they had a San Francisco location. I may have to start back at school. James, you think I could get a sabbatical? James Davis has steered the ship of Gear Up from the Department of Education and dealing with all of the challenges around grant making and compliance, him and his team. Give them a big round of applause for all that they've done. When I saw this Wharton sign, I thought about a couple of people from Philadelphia who've made such an impact on the lives that we live. Richard Wright and his daughter, Ruth Wright. And I'm going to talk a little bit about one of them now. But Richard Wright was born in the 1800s, but he was the first African-American who got his PhD from Penn. He launched a bank at 67 after studying at the Wharton School. It's called the Southern Bank. It made it even through the Depression. It survived, and when he sold it, it had assets of over $5 million. He developed the Association of African American Bankers. But what was interesting is his daughter also went to Penn and got a PhD, and she became a teacher and an educator, and eventually the chair of our Board of Education. And what's important to note is that when we talk about rising, Richard Wright was dropped off at a school in Georgia, which eventually became Atlanta University, but it was a place where African Americans could go to get education. And one of the generals had come by from the Union Army and said, well, after the war was over with, what should he tell the people up north? And Richard Wright told them to tell them that we are rising. Tell them that we are rising. In 1927, the Federal Reserve Bank created a whole program to help minorities start banks, and it was called Tell Them We Are Rising. And so when this theme was picked to talk about our nation rising together, it connects up in so many important ways what this is really all about, which is that America can't possibly retain its #1 position in the world if we leave so many of our young people in the shadows of opportunity. This morning, I talked with the administrator of NASA about the success of the New Horizons mission. And what is extraordinary about this is that, now this is the day, July 20th, in 1969, when the Apollo landed, some of you remember, some of you, landed on the moon, right? So now we had the New Horizons mission. This launched almost a decade ago, 9.5 years ago, and now through information, we know that almost everything we thought about Pluto was wrong. This is what, when you take ignorance away and provide education, you get knowledge. And it's fascinating. Well, as a country, if we're going to compete with billion-plus populated nations like China and India, in a nation of a little over 300 million, we can't afford to leave a third of our children on the sidelines. We have the ability to rise, and we see it now. We have the largest number of students in college ever, millions there because of Gear Up, because of your hard work in your state, in your community, through partnership programs and state programs. You are literally, and I said this to the chairman earlier, you're touching the future. These young people are going to achieve things that you can't even imagine. And when Richard Wright graduated from Wharton, I'm sure he could not imagine that his own daughter would go on to be the first African American to actually get a teacher certification in Pennsylvania and to be able to walk into school and teach young people. But there's so much more that we have to do. And I want to spend a minute talking about this because when I introduced the Gear Up legislation and we had a big debate, the Republicans were in charge in the House and in the Senate. Bill Clinton had had a tough midterm. He had tried to pass health care, and in the midterm election, things didn't go well for his team. And so the Republicans were in charge, and everybody thought this was a great idea, this notion of Gear Up, but they didn't think we could get it passed. Well, one of the things that we have to know about what Richard Wright was saying to the general from the Union Army when he said, tell them we are rising, part of that is a notion of optimism and faith and a belief. And faith is a belief in things that are not yet seen. But I had some sense that even among the other team on the Hill, that there were people among my Republican colleagues who wanted to see young people have an opportunity. That this was not just some notion that I could win support of on my team. And when we passed it in the House, and then we passed it in the Senate, now we did lose one vote in the Senate. I won't even burden you with who that was. It's not really, history's written by those who are who succeed, right? See, so when you're on the wrong side of history, you just kind of fade to gray, right? So whoever that one person was, we won't even burden history with it. But the point is that Gear Up was an idea based on a notion that success is not an individualized vocation, that we can't just succeed as individuals. That's why this theme is so important and so timely, because our success as a country has to be built on our collective ability to rise. So when Harvard looked at the design of Gear Up, they said it was unique among all of the educational programs at the federal level, not because it reached down to the K-12 space and it was in the Higher Ed Act, even though that was somewhat novel, but that what Harvard discerned in examining the program was that it was the first program of its kind that was built on the cohort model. That is that what we had done in the legislation is we had said you had to work with all of the young people. You had to give them all an opportunity. Because if we're going to succeed, we need so many more of our young people to be able to achieve their potential. And so, when you think about the great work that you're doing in terms of developing future educators and architects and attorneys and business leaders, hopefully a few congresspersons, when you think about touching the future in the sense of helping these young people, gathering them while the concrete is not yet hardened, and having an elongated conversation with them about their future, make sure that they understand that their future is inextricably intertwined with the future of their families, their communities, their country. If we don't produce more scientists and engineers, if we don't produce more young people with competencies in the STEM fields, it will be impossible for America to lead this world as we have over the last century. We need to create an innovation ecosystem, and that begins with education. It begins with taking these young people where they are and having them understand that they can achieve almost anything that they can imagine. I went to the best high school in the world at Overbrook. And we saw greatness among us, Wilt Chamberlain, and we got a stamp. But when Guy in Beaufort commanded the space shuttle, for those of us who went to this high school on the Hill, this was the most gigantic deal in the world. Because what it suggested is that there was an unlimited ability to achieve. And so now, when I got to the Congress, I said then, when I was being sworn in, we had a little prayer breakfast, I said that I was not concerned that the majority has shifted in the Congress, that I was convinced that we could still get things done. And Gear Up is just one example, but it's a powerful example that an idea whose time has come can overcome almost any challenge. And so today we have another shift in the Congress. The Republicans are in charge again. But Tom Cole, who I serve with on the Appropriations Committee, we serve on the Appropriations Committee on Labor, Health, and Education. He's a Republican, but he is the biggest supporter of Gear Up. And we work together, and now I just want to tell you that for the first time in the House, Gear Up got an appropriations ahead of, greater than even the requests from the administration. Now, and if you put that in a historical perspective, if you put it on a rear view mirrors, we've always had some challenges, particularly in the House. But you can sense that there's a new appreciation for the success of Gear Up. I went to visit Oklahoma, I don't know, probably 8 or 9 years ago. I can't recall the exact time frame, but I went to visit a center that is being funded in part through Gear Up. It's called the K-20 Center at Oklahoma University. And K-20, that's a faith-based notion. That's the notion of kids starting in kindergarten and not stopping until they get a terminal degree, right? That's about, as Mary McLeod Bethune said, having a thirst for education that can't be quenched. And they were talking about how these young people who are growing up in our midst now are digital natives and how we have to communicate with them in different ways. And that's why I was so impressed that even before the conference started, you had a workshop, a pre-conference workshop on texting campaigns to meet young people where they are and to constantly provide them with information that can empower them and help them move along life's highway to the success that we want them to have. So in Washington, all I can tell you is that Gear Up has won many friends on both sides of the aisle and in both parties. I was so impressed to see 2 of our young people from Gear Up from Kansas visit with the First Lady at the Beating the Odds Summit. Well, Gear Up has been beating the odds since its inception. And the young people who you are helping to move along, these young people are beating odds, like the odds that all of you are familiar with, because even though the chairman has a story, every single person in this room has a story. Life has never been just circumstances of crystal stairs. There always are challenges. There always are obstacles to overcome. But I'm convinced that America's ability to overcome its share of obstacles are made greater and enhanced through the work of Gear Up. And we have more to do. We've invested $5.5 billion in Gear Up since its inception. Some 13 million young people have been helped. This is a big deal. Give yourselves a round of applause. But know this, $5.5 billion might sound like a lot of money, but I serve on the Appropriations Committee. We spent $2 billion a week in Afghanistan in our longest war ever, right? We're going to spend $8 billion to launch the James Webb Telescope so we can look into the heavens. This country has to understand that, yes, big science is important, and having the world's greatest military is important, but smart bombs won't replace the need to have smart children. We need to raise our aspirations to meet the challenge. Gear Up is great, but we need Gear Up everywhere where kids need to have this kind of opportunity. We need to grow Gear Up, not be content, not settle for being the largest early college and scholarship program in the country. We need to be everywhere where we need to be. And you know that Gear Up is great, but it'd be even great if we were reaching millions of more young people. So let us go from here knowing, as I've told you before, that the reward for good work is more work. Let me just make sure we're all on the same page. The reward for good work is more work. And then let me just conclude with this by telling you about the story of Richard Wright's daughter, Ruth Hare, who I mentioned as this young teacher, who then became chair of our board. In her 80s, she went back to the school she started at, in the heart of North Philadelphia. And she announced to every single one of the students there. And we had some great programs that have helped young people go on to college in Philadelphia. We had, Philadelphia Futures, and we got a lot of great efforts in Philadelphia through a lot of great families and foundations that have done a lot. But when Ruth Hare walked back into this school in North Philadelphia in her 80s, it said that this young woman who started there as a teacher decades earlier had come back as an 80-year-old woman, and that she had put together millions of dollars of her own savings over the years, and that she was going to pay for the college education of every one of these 106 students. And she said, we set up a program, and we're gonna embed it over at Temple University, and it's called Tell Them We Are Rising. And all of you are going to get a chance to go to college. It says something about her father's statement decades earlier, that this notion of rising, of achieving beyond the circumstances of the moment, of being able to understand that even in life's highway, as the twists and turns around the bend, you can't always see where the journey's taking you, but you have to have the faith to keep going and know with a certainty that as great as America is today, our greatest days are still in front of us if we take these young people and head them off on life's highway with an education and a thirst for knowledge. And let us know that we will rise together, and Gear Up will be the engine of that rising. Just like if you're baking a cake, that baking powder creates that little chemistry interaction. That's what this is all about. Thank you, INSEP, for all you're doing and all you have done and all you will do. Thank you.